right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. In this video, I want to talk about the latest guest posing at 6 weeks out from your reigning, defending Mr. Olympia champ, Samson Dauda. And I think the first thing that I want to say is, again, just acknowledging we're not getting guest posings from anybody else that's in that top, really the top six, at this close to the Olympia. Now, granted, this has been a really good build-up to the 2025 Olympia because just in this week alone, we've gotten updates from Hottie, Derek, Nick, and now Samson. But of all these guys that we've been talking about for those top 5-6 spots, Samson is probably the only one we're going to see do a guest posing between now and the Olympia. And, you know, the cherry on top of that is he is the reigning defending Olympia champ. He's not just one of the top six. He is Mr. Olympia. So, again, I think we should appreciate that we have a reigning Mr. Olympia champ that in the very, heat of his prep is still doing guest posings, appearances, and on top of that, he's got Quint Beastwood staying with him, taking him under his wing for the Italy Pro. I'm still just very impressed with what Samson has done with the title, the way that he's carried himself as Mr. Olympia, being an ambassador for the sport. I think it's fantastic, and who knows, maybe similar to last year, we see Samson do maybe a little bit of a warm-up show, even before the Olympia, which would be crazy, but he did it last year. The Tsunami Show. So how does Samson look in this guest posing? First of all, I think Samson looks significantly better than he looked on July 12th, about 6 weeks ago, which was the last guest posing that we saw from Samson there in the UK. He looked a lot softer there. That would have, granted, yeah, that would have been about 12 weeks out. But I think in this guest posing, you're looking at a very different version of Samson. Much tighter, much crisper, much better condition here, really starting to look like it's crunch time, and it is. And I think I even said this in that guest posing video back in July, that before we know it, we're going to be talking about 6, 5, 4, 3 weeks out from the Olympia. That was 12 weeks out, and here we are at 6. That time in between really flew by. I think Samson looks great in this guest posing. Obviously, the strong suits of Samson's physique are his aesthetically pleasing frame, his structure, the size that he carries. Very tall, imposing guy on stage compared to Nick, Derek, Hottie. His height and his frame, I think, does a lot for him. He's very well filled out for a taller guy, very aesthetically pleasing. But the condition is really what I was looking for here, because that first guest posing video that we saw back in July, and again, it was 12 weeks out. I wasn't expecting him to be, peeled to the bone. That wasn't anywhere near, that was guest posing condition. That wasn't what we wanted to see from Samson. There wasn't really any detail to be seen there. Here, you're seeing that detail. A lot deeper cuts in the legs. His midsection is in a lot better here. His abs are deeper. He's pulling the vacuum pose deeper. His waist is tighter. No sign of distension. He certainly looks a lot drier here than he looked back in July. And man, I would just say that we're lucky to be getting all these updates at 6 weeks out. You don't typically have this where all these top guys, are posting these updates. And again, I will be doing a video on Monday when the competitor list, the official competitor list, comes out for the Italy Pro. I'll be doing an in-depth video on that. But this week, we've had so much Olympia-specific physique updates to talk about, so many to talk about. That's really been the topic of the week, and it's exciting to see. And still, honestly, I would say if you pull up, we'll put them all three here on the screen, the top three from last year. And granted, I would like to see Nick in this conversation as well, but Derek, Hottie, and Samson, we got updates from all three of them this week. I would say of the three, I'm still the most impressed with Hottie. Personally, I really like to see the type of conditioning that Hottie brings, that crisp, really sharp, really deep lines, a ton of detail. To me, I try to describe it like this. Hottie's physique is like looking at a physique in 4K. He comes across like 4K ultra high definition. And then you look at Derek and Samson, while they look good, it looks like they're, 1080p compared to Hottie. He just brings this level of detail. And me personally, that's what I like the most out of a top Olympia caliber physique. So of the three, I would still say that I'm the most impressed by what we're seeing from Hottie at 3 weeks out. I would say Samson, of these three guys, I'm second most impressed with Samson so far. I think he looks great in this update. He's, like I said, comparatively speaking, he's a lot crisper than the previous guest posing. And then I would say of the three, least impressed with Derek Lunsford. And that's not meant to be a knock on Derek. I love Derek. I'm definitely not on the Derek Lunsford hate train. Like it seems like a lot of people are. I've met Derek. I've gotten the opportunity to hang out with Derek before he ever won the Olympia. Really nice guy, great physique. So I'm not saying that to slight him, but just honestly, of those three guys, of the top three, I would say I'm least impressed with his update so far. And what does that really mean? Probably not a whole lot, because I felt the same way going into the Arnold, and Derek won the Arnold. So just relatively speaking, 6 weeks out, I'm going hottie out of the three. Now, let's take Derek out of the equation for a second and put in the latest 6 weeks out update from Nick Walker. I would rank Nick Walker's, his recent updates, to me, and you guys may disagree with this, but to me, I was more impressed by Nick than Derek. So I want to put Nick in this, kind of three-man physique update call-out that we've got on the screen here. And I've seen a lot of people say they don't think that Nick will be able to crack the top three. Looking at these updates, man, I don't know. I can see Nick in that top three. I really can. I don't see him any lower than top six. I think without a doubt he's going to be first call-out. I think he'll be placing in the money. Top six for sure. But of the top guys that we've been looking at, I think Nick's updates and his physique is on par, if not better than, the grouping of Derek, Hottie, Samson. I think Nick's physique belongs in that mix, in that conversation, in those top three spots. I just think he's going to be back with a vengeance this year. It's easy. Bodybuilding has like this short-term memory loss type of thing. Bodybuilding fandom seems to. And, people always say that old adage, you're only as good as your last show. And the bodybuilding kind of memory time frame seems to work that way. And I feel like that's why it's been so easy for so many people to kind of write Nick completely out of the equation, because he did miss 2 Olympias back-to-back. That's big. And, voluntarily, one of them. So I can understand, like, going into Pittsburgh when we still hadn't seen Nick back on stage yet. I understand why it was easy to still say, people were saying he's done. He's never going to be in the conversation again. Then Pittsburgh comes around, and we see one of the better versions. I don't know if I would say the best version of Nick, but one of the better versions of Nick that we've seen at that Pittsburgh show. Then he's back in the mix. Then he wins the New York Pro. Now he's back qualified. And I think most significantly at Pittsburgh, and I know we've talked about it 1,000 times, but the reason why I've talked about this so much is because I do think it's extremely significant. Whether you think Nick should have won the Pittsburgh show or not, Nick beating Derek at the prejudging of that show, after Derek had just won the Arnold and beat Samson, I think is extraordinarily significant. Even though Nick didn't win the show, even though at the end of the day Derek beat Nick at that show, I think it's extremely significant that Nick was able to beat Derek at the prejudging of that show, because I really do believe at that point in time, even though Samson is still the reigning defending Mr. Olympia, I think at that point in time, Derek could be considered the best bodybuilder in the world after the Arnold. And because, frankly, we don't see it happen that often, what we saw happen at the Arnold. We're very conditioned and used to thinking, Mr. Olympia is the best bodybuilder in the world all year. That whole year, they're the best. And title-wise speaking, yes. But it's also because you typically don't see a Mr. Olympia, at least anymore, competing outside of the Olympia during other shows throughout the year, because they don't give themselves the opportunity to be beaten outside of the Olympia. So one of the reasons why we're so accustomed to thinking that way is that Mr. Olympia is just the best in the world until the next Olympia, is because we don't really see them compete and open themselves up to being beaten outside of the O. But that is what we saw. So Samson was the best in the world in 2024, and Derek beat him at the Arnold. So you could make the argument that at that point, Derek was the best in the world. Fast forward to Pittsburgh, Nick beats Derek at prejudging. I think that's huge. Some people might not. I think it's huge. And I know people say, well, Derek was just off. That's why. Nick wouldn't have beaten him if Derek wasn't off at the Pittsburgh show. Well, then that begs the question, what if Derek's off at the Olympia? Because look, let's be honest. When you look back at last year's Olympia, Derek was off at that show. What if that happens again in 2025? So I really think at this point you could make a case for any of these four guys, or maybe even a wild card comes in here, a Nexzilla or a Good Vito, even though I think that's unlikely in wins. But any of these four guys could win based on a ton of different varying logics. You could go into this with the logic that, look, Derek beat Samson, Derek beat Nick. By that logic, he's going to win the Olympia. You could look at it with the logic of Samson has the champion's advantage. He's the defending champ. Maybe he was just off at the Arnold. He's going to win the Olympia. You could look at it as Hottie is going to bring conditioning that he's not going to be off. He's going to win. You could look at it as Nick almost beat Derek in Pittsburgh. Derek going into Pittsburgh was the favorite. I think the best in the world at that point. I think at that point Derek became the favorite to win the Olympia. But then almost losing to Nick, I think took away that edge that he had. And you can make the argument that if Derek is off again and Nick is even better at the Olympia, there's a chance Nick could win the whole thing. I don't think that's likely, but I will sit here and say I don't think it's impossible that you could see Nick Walker win the Olympia. I think there's several ways that you could rationalize that being the outcome. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Out of these four guys that we discussed in this video, who do you think is most likely to win the Olympia? And what did you think overall about this Samson Dauda guest posing? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.